Welcome to the 700 Club. Bad news from the Caribbean. Hurricane Fiona has unleashed her fury on Puerto Rico. The Category 1 storm has dumped more than 2 feet of rain, inundating the island with floods and landslides. The governor has described the damage as catastrophic.
90-mile-an-hour winds knocked out the power grid, putting 1.5 million people in the dark. Dale Hurd reports on the devastation and where the storm is headed next.
Officials in Puerto Rico say it's still too early to estimate the damage from a storm that was still punishing the island with torrential rain and historic flooding this morning. The powerful storm arrived Sunday afternoon, dumping up to 30 inches of rain, unleashing dangerous floodwaters, landslides, and knocking out the power grid. This man says he was sleeping when the roof of his home was ripped off and landed over there. In one mountain town, rushing water washed away this bridge. Power poles and a guardrail connected to the bridge were ripped from the ground by the current, taking everything connected to the structure downstream. The Category 1 storm came ashore with maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour, lashing the U.S. territory that's still recovering from a string of strong earthquakes and Hurricane Maria. Puerto Rico's governor says the experience with Maria helped the island prepare.
That's why people are very responsive and they cooperate, because they still remember Maria.
The White House approved an emergency declaration freeing up federal resources for emergency response and disaster relief efforts. Heavy rain and storm surge flooding is expected for the Dominican Republic as Fiona turns north. It's expected to stay clear of the U.S. East Coast, but could threaten Bermuda later this week. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, Operation Blessing was there after Hurricane Maria, and we're prepping our disaster relief right now to evaluate the storm damage and what can we do about it. If you want to be a part of that, all you have to do is give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463, or you can text OBDR, which stands for Operation Blessing Disaster Relief, OBDR, to 71777. Be a part of helping those people in need. Well, in other news, President Biden made some very surprising statements in a recent interview, including whether or not he'll run for re-election. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, in a wide-ranging interview on CBS's 60 Minutes last night, the president had some eye-opening responses to Scott Pelley's questions, including whether he'll seek a second term.
It's much too early to make that kind of decision. I'm a great respecter of fate. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing my job. I'm going to do that job. And within the time frame that makes sense after this next election cycle here, going into next year, make a judgment of what to do.
You say that it's much too early to make that decision. I take it the decision has not been made in your own head.
Look, my intention, as I said to begin with, is that I would run again. But it's just an intention. But is it a firm decision that I run again? That remains to be seen.
The president also raised eyebrows with his comments on U.S. support for Taiwan if China attacks, reportedly departing from an official U.S. policy of not commenting on whether the U.S. will send military forces.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion?
Yes.
The president has made similar statements in the past. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has logged a formal complaint with the U.S. over the president's remarks. Turning now to the war in Ukraine, leaders say there is more evidence of atrocities in territories liberated from the Russian army. A mass burial site with dozens of wooden crosses discovered in a forest near the city of Izium, including one mass grave holding 17 Ukrainian soldiers, some showing signs of torture. Officials also say torture chambers have been discovered in some areas.
Unfortunately, what we see in Izium, what we saw in Bucha before, And we can only imagine the situation in Mariupol and other places which are still under occupation. But it's tortures, rapes, killings, war crimes of massive proportions.
The Ukrainian government is documenting the evidence for war crimes trials. The atrocities are forcing millions to flee Ukraine. 6 months ago, more than 100 Jewish orphans found short-term shelter in Israel. As Julie Stahl reports, the group is now moving forward with their lives in the Jewish state.
A rabbi and his wife led the orphans, other children, and staff out of Ukraine and found a safe landing outside Jerusalem. The sign behind me says Bruchim Habaim. That's welcome in Hebrew. And these Ukrainian refugees have certainly felt welcome here at Nes Harim for the last 6 months.
The half year we were here was the most wonderful half a year. We didn't know there was such a thing in the world, that they would receive us with such love.
People really opened their hearts and their arms to us and just did whatever they could to help us out. So that was really amazing. And we feel that. It was very, very, very heartwarming.
Rabbi Shlomo Wilhelm and his wife Esther led the Jewish community in Zhytomyr, Ukraine for 27 years before fleeing the war. Now their entourage is leaving Nes Harim for the Israeli coastal city of Ashkelon, where they'll stay for at least a year.
But it's very much a transition period, which means we always knew we wouldn't be able to stay here forever. So it was like we got used to life here, and now we have to get ready to go on.
There's no contradiction between good and bad. Everything good comes with difficulty. All of life is a challenge. All of life is about continuing to go forward. Everything new is like the peel of a seed. Before a tree starts to grow, the seed decays in the ground and then a new tree grows.
CBN News first met the group shortly after their arrival in Israel. It came during the Purim holiday, when Jews celebrate deliverance from evil, as told in the book of Esther. We've continued to follow them, such as when the kids' teacher from Ukraine made a surprise visit, and now for their farewell party. Gili Maimon manages the Nes Harim Field School and became hero and friend to the children.
This was a very, very special project that Kakal did together with the Israelis. We will miss them and we wish them a lot of success on their new path.
Irena Kabakova says she has mixed emotions.
I feel, a bit sad, yes, because we are leaving, and happy, yes. I'm in a good mood. I'm here for my children. I hope they will have great future here.
Nes Harim is a field school of Keren Kayemet LeYisrael, Jewish National Fund, also known as Kakal. It's normally a place where youth groups and others come to hike and enjoy nature.
Kakal is an organization of all the Jewish people. We say that every Jew here in the land and in the diaspora has a share in Kakal. Therefore, it was clear and natural that we would help the Jews in Ukraine.
CEO Ben Ami says Kakal also is helping Jews still in Ukraine with humanitarian aid.
It was our privilege to fulfill part of the goals, part of the aspirations of Kakal. It was exciting, it was humane, and it really emphasized how important Kakal is, not only for Israel, but for Jews around the world.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Nes Harim, Israel.
The world bids a final goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II today. Hundreds of world leaders attending the service in London.
O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?
People of loving service are rare in any walk of life. Leaders of loving service are still rarer.
The ceremony beginning with a procession from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey. King Charles III, alongside his brothers and sisters and the grandchildren, follow the casket. Authorities expected up to 1 million people to crowd the streets of London for that final goodbye. President Biden and the First Lady in attendance as well. Last night, signing the official condolence book and joining other leaders for a reception at Buckingham Palace.
She was the same in person as her image. Decent, honorable, and all about service.
All this week, hundreds of thousands stood in lines up to 5 miles long to file past the Queen's casket. Gordon, back to you.
Well, she made a vow of a lifetime of service. She did that when she was young, when she was just in her 20s, and here she fulfilled it. What an amazing legacy to say, yes, I'm going to stick by my vow. I'm going to fulfill what I pledged to do. And she did it with grace. She did it with elegance. But most of all, she did it with perseverance.